If you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. I was reminded of that quote by the archivist, who in turn was, that quote was suggested to her by musician David Dondero. Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker, 100 years old. Obviously, he didn't live to be 100 years old. But September 29th, 2020 would have been Charlie Parker's 100th birthday. So I've said this before if you've watched my videos. To me, Charlie Parker was the greatest musician that ever lived. If I had to pick one musician, it'd be Charlie Parker. To me, the fathers of jazz, Charlie Parker, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, they really got it going. I did a video on bebop. Charlie Parker was probably the main guy. Bebop, Charlie Parker. I'm going to show some of my Charlie Parker collection. I don't have an extensive collection, but I'm a big fan of Charlie Parker. I suggest anyone who has the least bit interest in jazz must own some music by Charlie Parker. Late 1939, kind of started jamming with people like Dizzy Gillespie and Art Tatum, and it started this whole sound, faster music, smaller groups, and that's how bebop began. That's a simplistic description of how bebop began. Obviously, because of the Musicians Union, because of World War II, a lot of stuff wasn't happening in the early 40s, mid 40s. So 1945, as the war ended, World War II ended, bebop just exploded on the scene. So happy birthday, fellow Virgo, Charlie Parker. This is a fucking great set if you can find it. I'm playing in the background the CD box of this. This is the Savoy Sessions, 1944 to 1948. So really kind of the pre-bebop thing, which is, I'm sorry, this is the height of bebop. Get my timing all wrong. This is right, literally at the close of the war into the end of the 40s when bebop was king. Faster music. Remember, before that was the big bands like Benny Goodman and the like, and another artist who I was part of that whole scene that Charlie Parker played with, that was playing with Benny Goodman, is a great guitarist, Charlie Christian. This is a fabulous 70s comp by Charlie Christian. Nice hat too. So I'm going to show a handful of other artists that kind of weave in and out of the career. But the complete Savoy Sessions and Dial studio recordings. I don't know if this is still in print as a vinyl box, but has a fabulous book of Charlie Parker and the scene. And just wonderful, almost like modernist art covers. Very much, they look like paintings of Rothko, if you know Rothko's artwork, modernist painter. I wonder who did these, I'm not looking at. But anyway, one of my favorite things is on this record, Salt Peanuts, Dizzy Gillespie, Kenny Clark song, Salt Peanuts. Amazing record, and Dizzy Gillespie is one of my favorite. Now, I feel really honored that I've got to meet and spend a little bit of time with two of the musicians that really were close with Charlie Parker. In the late 70s, I mentioned this before, at the Monterey Jazz Festival in 1978, I was in the K-Jazz booth. K-Jazz was the Jazz Bay Area radio station that would every year broadcast a good portion of the Monterey Jazz Festival. And I sat next to Dizzy Gillespie while he was on the air being interviewed. He passed a joint around, so I got stoned with Dizzy Gillespie. DG Days, Dizzy Gillespie. This is a Savoy Sessions. Incredible record. This is a 70s comp that came out on Savoy, part of Arista Records. If you see this, I highly suggest this record. But anything with Dizzy Gillespie. The other artist that I met when I was in college, San Francisco State, I was in the broadcasting, did recording, and I helped a person I met at KQED, the public broadcasting station, do a live remote show of Earl Father Hines. Earl Hines, great piano player. This would have been 1975-ish. Recording session in Marin County, California. That was live on KQED. Great piano player, and I got introduced to him because of Ry Cooder, Paradise and Lunch album, the song Diddy Wah Diddy. Ry Cooder and Earl Hines doing an amazing duet. This is a Chiaroscuro release, the recording sessions, quintessential recording sessions. I don't even know when this was. This is probably like, this might even be in the 70s, you know, later on. But Earl Hines. So Earl Hines and Dizzy Gillespie, two of my favorite artists that were a really big part of that scene. But again, this Savoy box of Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, I mean the early of Miles Davis, Max Roach, Errol Gardner, Bud Powell, J.J. Johnson, and John Lewis. John Lewis would, great vibe player, who was really a part of that whole early bebop scene as well, and would later be an original member of the Modern Jazz Quartet, which they don't get a lot of love here. Some people think they're too like romantic sappy, but I'm a huge fan of the Modern Jazz Quartet as well. Just to show you some of my Parker collection, Night and Day, Charlie Parker and his orchestra, doing some of the classics on Verve. He was obviously signed by Norman Granz. The Genius of Charlie Parker, #1. Bird on Verve, his nickname was Yardbird, and they called him Bird for short, but Charlie Parker. Charlie, I'd love to have all these. This is Afro-Cuban jazz. Him and Dizzy Gillespie really popularized that in the sort of the early 50s on that. Really great stuff. Late 40s, early 50s with the great Cuban artist Machito. So I highly recommend any of the Afro-Cuban jazz. I do have a wonderful, I'll link it here, video I did on these Verve reissues that were issued from 1976 to 1981. Double records, Charlie Parker, Billie Holiday, Dizzy Gillespie, the Afro-Cuban stuff. 2 record sets, they're usually pristine. Most of them are mastered by Robert Ludwig. I highly recommend them. The link is below. Watch that video if you haven't. And usually you can get them anywhere between $10 and $20 used. And usually I find that they're in pristine shape. People didn't play them for whatever reason, but they're comps mostly from the Savoy, Dial years, and Verve records, but really great. This is a great collection. I need to get another copy of this because this is one of those electronic simulated stereo. Bird and Diz, incredible record. It's been reissued. So I think this might be on the docket for these new analog production based, actually not analog productions, but Verve, Universal Music is putting out a series that are emulating the Tone Poets. So it's just starting out now with Getson Gilberto, as well as a Oscar Peterson and Louis Armstrong record. And it's going to be Nina Simone. It's basically Impulse catalog, Verve catalog, and others, and they're going to be sort of patterned after the Tone Poets in that, you know, $30 to $35 sweet spot with beautiful heavy covers and analog mastered recordings. So I highly recommend this. But this record, I need to get a copy of this. But of course, at this point, I'm sure the electronic simulation, most people won't even know these are mono recordings. They shouldn't even have bothered. The issue, Columbia Masterworks did some issues. There's so many reissues of Charlie Parker. I suggest any of these you can get and just love them. This is Charlie Parker Summit at Birdland. Charlie Parker All-Stars with Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, John Lewis, Kenny Clark, Roy Haynes, Milt Buckner. Bebop at its best. Incredible bebop. I love this stuff. It doesn't get enough showcase here on the vinyl community since everyone's got their like panties in a bunch for Blue Note records. I love Blue Note records, but come on, bebop, give me a friggin' break. It's not going to be high fidelity, but it's going to be great friggin' music. Charlie Parker, Another Night at Birdland with Bud Powell and Fats Navarro. Incredible record. Anytime I see these records, I pick them up. Bird with Strings. Charlie Parker always wanted to work with strings. He was a classical nut, classical freak, and he liked Bartok, and he just wanted to do the strings. So there are a lot of records with Bird with strings. Some people don't like the strings. They think they're over lush, but they're amazing. Oscar Peterson did the same thing, and I think it really works in that genre. I said this, Bud Powell, incredible record by Bud Powell, piano player, really moody, beautiful piano player that was on the train with, not train, but with Bird. On the Bird train. Since I was mentioning Earl Father Hines, here are a couple other things. This is early Bluebird, early RCA recordings, which is a Bluebird offshoot of RCA, electronic photographed, beautiful record. This is sort of the early big band. Look at that early Earl Hines, man. Incredible, incredible. And Earl Father Hines and his All-Stars featuring Muggsy Spanier. This was a little later. This probably would have been the 50s, I think. Beatle Connection. The liner notes here are by Dave Dexter Jr. Dave Dexter Jr. was the guy who dexterized the Beatles record for Capitol Records in the 1960s. So, is that it? I showed this on one of my big solo box sets, Art Tatum, big solo piano thing that played with Bird as well. So, I gotta say, happy birthday, happy 100th birthday to Charlie Parker, one of the greatest jazz musicians, one of the greatest innovators, one of the early jazz gods of saxophone and music. Sexy, soulful, he's got a breathy tone, and I just want to say I love you, Charlie Parker. Happy birthday. August 29th, 2000, 100 years old. Let's celebrate Charlie Parker. Pull out your Charlie Parker records and enjoy the music. Mazzy really loves you, and Mazzy loves Bird.